Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. In a historic first for the City University of New York, Frank H. former chancellor, dean, and distinguished professor at the University of California, Hastings Law School, has been chosen as the next president of Queens College, the first Asian American to take the helm of the 83-year-old school. What attracted him to Queens College? What are his plans for this most ethnically diverse of CUNY campuses? And what are his thoughts about the racial issues that are roiling the country right now? Welcome.
It's great to be here with you. I am so honored and humbled to join you as I contemplate and prepare for my move to Queens.
You have a very interesting background. You are the son of immigrants from Taiwan. As I said, you have served in several capacities at the law school, Hastings Law School, at the University of California. You were also, for a decade, you taught at Howard University's law school, the first Asian American professor to teach at this historically Black university. And you were also a trustee of Gallaudet University, a school for the deaf and hearing impaired. Have you consciously sought out places to work that were different culturally from your own background?
I've always been dedicated to communities with a mission. I don't just want to go someplace that's interested in climbing in the rankings. I want to go someplace that changes people's lives. To be at Howard University as the first Asian American law professor at a historically Black institution founded after the Civil War to educate recently freed slaves, I'll tell you, that changed my life. I hadn't grown up in an environment like that, and when I was there, I learned as much as I taught. I could see that despite myself, I suffered from prejudices, just those images rattling around in the back of my head, no different than anyone else. And I enjoyed privileges that I wasn't even aware of. I'll give you an example. No one wants to compare suffering. There's no winner in that contest. But I appreciated that when I walked down the street, every now and then a kid would come up to me, even in the 90s in Washington, D.C., and do karate moves. You know, they challenged me to a kung fu match and howl and hiss and say ching chong something to the other. Even if I was wearing a coat and tie, they figured that I had that black belt on underneath, right? But my students, my colleagues who were Black, they faced much worse. When they walked down the street, people clutched their purse or backpack a little closer to their bodies. Not every day, but often enough, they were sent that signal, none too subtle, that they were a mugger, a thug, a criminal, worse. And so when we look at these patterns around us, we see it's not all the same. It's not symmetrical. When I was at Gallaudet, I was a trustee. It was so different. That's an institution that's bilingual, American Sign Language, called ASL, and English. The interpreters were there for me, a hearing person. I was the one who wasn't fluent and didn't understand. Everyone else, they were fine with sign language. And I was the one who needed the help.
You have said when you discovered Queens College, you thought it was meant for you. What did you mean by that?
I had always known about Queens College. Actually, one of my senior colleagues at Howard, who passed away tragically, was a graduate, as well as another colleague. So there were two who were Jewish kids from the Bronx who'd gone to Queens in the 1970s and spoke so highly of it as the engine of the American dream. College changes everyone, but for those who are the first generation, the first in their family among all their cousins to have that opportunity, it's profound. And if you had said to me 25 years ago, someday I would be a college president, I would have laughed at that because there weren't any Asian Americans who were college presidents, even though we're reputed to be whiz kids and rocket scientists, and in some aspects are overrepresented. When you get to leadership roles, there's that glass ceiling, or some would call it a bamboo ceiling. But when I knew that Queens was doing the search, my friends reached out. They said, you know, your career has been about civil rights, and diversity. There's no other place that you should think about going. And I wasn't contemplating being a college president. This was the only search I was in. I did not want to be a college president. I wanted to be the Queen's college president. Because when you ride the 7 train, you see the world. And the borough of Queens is more diverse statistically than any other place.
Any other borough, that's correct. For someone who's only 53 years old, you've done so many things. In addition to a number of administrative leadership roles in higher education, you clerked with a federal judge, you practiced with a law firm, you did pro bono work for indigent offenders. Is there something about a law degree that prepares one to do a variety of things?
Absolutely. It prepares you to stand up and speak out, to know your rights and responsibilities. I wanted to be an architect when I was a kid growing up in Detroit in the 70s, but there was a tragic hate crime, terrible killing. A fellow named Vincent Chin, 27 years old, Chinese American. I didn't know him, but I knew that time and I knew the place. And when I read about the case, I knew it could have been me. He was out celebrating his upcoming wedding. It was a bachelor's party. He didn't want to be a martyr or an icon. This was during a terrible recession, as bad as we're experiencing now. And when there was a perceived threat from Asia, from Japan. We forget this because the Japanese economy, it was a bubble and it burst. But there was a moment in the late 70s, early 80s when everyone said it's an economic Pearl Harbor. Those little yellow men are taking over. When people thought Japan Incorporated would soon own every landmark, including in New York City, every sports team, we'd all be working for a Japanese boss. The rise of the East, the decline of the West. So people looked at you if you had yellow skin, black hair, this texture, and almond-shaped eyes, and they would say, which side are you on? You had the face of the enemy. This fellow Chin, there's much more to the story. He was killed by auto workers, white auto workers who use racial slurs, those terrible words that I remember as the common cruelty of the playground when I was a kid. Those same slurs that constituted the daily bullying. And then using obscenity, I won't repeat it here, but they looked at him, according to witnesses, and they said, it's because of you, fill in the blank.
So is that what made you wanted to pursue a career in law or a law degree at any rate?
That's right. They said it was because of him they were out of work, and they bludgeoned him to death using a baseball bat. So the guest who would have attended his wedding went to his funeral instead. They were sentenced to only $3,000 as a fine and probation. They said it wasn't a hate crime. This was mistaken identity twice over. Someone of Chinese background mistaken for Japanese, a representative of Tokyo, Toyota. Someone who was an American mistaken for a perpetual foreigner. Someone who's salt of the earth, working class, just like his attackers. That case made me see how important it was to participate in this diverse democracy. You couldn't just put your head down and do your work, get good grades, and show that you were better. That would just increase the racial resentment.
You had to do something.
That's right. And so I became a writer and ultimately a lawyer.
When I was in law school, everybody, all the students there, claimed they didn't really want to practice law. They really wanted to do something else. They wanted to be poets. They really wanted to act on Broadway. But 99% of them wound up practicing law. So anyway, although some did, public service, but I do think that a degree gives you confidence and to do a lot of things, and also makes people take you seriously.
That's right.
You are arriving at Queens College in the midst of an international upheaval over racial discrimination against African Americans in particular. What do you think about the protests that are going on and the responses to those protests?
It is so important to be a good ally. And that means not appropriating someone else's suffering, but asking, how can we participate in a historic struggle for Black equality, an unfinished project from the Reconstruction to the Supreme Court's decision in 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, which led to massive resistance in the Deep South, open resistance, and even in the North, where there was plenty of racial segregation when I was a kid. Well, these are not new issues. They're the issues we faced in 1968. These issues have lingered, and now they've burst forth, exposed for the world to see. The past few years have brought a resurgence of hardcore bigotry, the egregious, in-your-face, unashamed, open form where people will just use those words, but more than just words. I'm so sympathetic because when I was a kid, people would say to me, just reply, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And even as a kid, I knew the words led to the sticks and stones. There's a spectrum here, right? We want our bigots to be visibly ugly. We want to be able to look at someone and say, that is a racist, and condemn them. What we don't realize is sometimes it's underneath the surface and there's a whole spectrum. Sometimes, as in the past, now again, there are people who hold high office, who are leaders. There are people who run businesses. There are people of every walk of life. And regrettably, some of them are our neighbors and co-workers. Some of them aren't aware that they have this prejudice. When they say, you're so articulate, well, that sort of is a compliment, but it's not. It's a way to say you're not like the rest of them. You're not
or
like
when they say, I don't think of you as a Black person.
That's right, which is impossible because, you know, everyone sees race. When people say, oh, I'm colorblind, I'm skeptical. And you don't want to challenge someone and say, well, you're not really. But I'll tell you, I'll admit, I see race. We all do. If you meet someone who's of racially ambiguous background, you wonder to yourself, even if you know that that's not right. And
you want to know what they are. What are they?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And even if you know, you shouldn't say, what are you, as if you're an object. Nonetheless, people always wonder. And so even if you're a bird watcher in Central Park, if you're African American, people look at you and they're frightened and they show it. And that latent underlying bias,
in fact, to interrupt you, you've written that these days everyone feels the need to publicly proclaim that they are not bigots, when in fact you suggested what they need to do is to publicly acknowledge their bigotry.
That's right. There are so many statements now that I've been receiving, as everyone has, via email and social media, the facile statements pledging to do better. And that's necessary, but it's not sufficient. It sometimes seems as if people, they just feel suddenly now they have to say, no, not me. Suddenly they've embraced Black Lives Matter. They didn't last year. They didn't the year before. They didn't yesterday or last week. But now, when it is so palpable, when we look and we see and we realize this is an historic moment. You know, we're always living through history. Time only travels forward, but we don't usually catch ourselves and say, I know this moment. People will ask, where were you? What did you do? What stand did you take? And I hope that the platitudes lead to more. When the Reverend Martin Luther King wrote his letter from a Birmingham jail, he did not challenge American principles. He instead challenged people to live up to their professed principles. We have the greatest ideals. It's just that our aspirations aren't always a reality, and it's so easy to deny the growing gap between the haves and have-nots.
As more Asians have immigrated to the United States, there does seem to be more tension between Asians and African Americans. For instance, the cab drivers who used to refuse to pick me up because they thought I was going to Harlem or the Bronx used to be white. Now, more of them seem to be Asian. Now, I don't know if that's because they're more Asian cab drivers, but I mean, some would argue that in their desire to assimilate, and this has been true of the Irish and the Italians before them, they have adopted some of the same racist attitudes towards Blacks and Latinos that white people have harbored for years.
You're right. What's happened, whenever you arrive and you're a newcomer or people figure you are fresh off the boat, that pejorative phrase, you're expected to assimilate, to fit in. What they never mention is the standard. If you copy whites, if you live among whites, if you do as the white majority does, congratulations, you're upwardly mobile. But if you're purposefully among African Americans, people want to say you're doing it wrong, as kids would say today, that somehow you didn't get the memo. That's not the community you're supposed to associate with. That happens again and again. I'll give you a concrete example. Asian Americans, we face this moral dilemma. This is a true story. This has happened more than once. It doesn't happen every day, but it happens often enough. I'll be in a room for a meeting. I'll be the only person who's not white. And sometimes people look at me when I walk in as if to say, no, your meeting's down the hall. You're in the wrong room. And before that meeting starts with the important agenda, someone will tell a little joke. They're sophisticated enough. They're not going to use the N-word, but they might talk about those people or say a little something. If I laugh, I've joined the club. If I say, excuse me, well, I'm not going to be invited back to that room again. And if I'm silent, that's not all that much better. So Asian Americans face this moral dilemma. The entire nation is at a crossroads. We all feel this. What choice will we make, unity or division? For Asian Americans, there's also a choice. Do we want to be honorary whites, or are we people of color? Will we say we are domestic minorities, or will we remain that perpetual foreigner, thought to be tourists or visitors, sojourners, our heart secretly overseas? These are the choices we face, and they manifest themselves just in our daily life, even, perhaps especially, when we don't notice that that's the choice.
Affirmative action continues to be a hot button issue in education right now. New York City is under pressure to admit more Black and Latino students to its elite public high schools, where Asian students tend to predominate. And the other side, people say, well, if you let them in, I mean, you're cheating the Asians who have gotten higher scores on the test, and you don't want to do that. Meanwhile, Harvard is being sued for allegedly discriminating against Asian applicants in favor of Black applicants. I mean, do you have a position on those controversies?
This is so complicated. I'll give you several answers. You know, law professors tend to say it depends, and it really does. Let me be clear. I'm against anti-Asian bias. That's because I'm against all bias. And education used to be perceived of as an opportunity to be distributed widely to all, to improve the world. It was a common good. Now it's characterized as a reward for the few. You have to earn it instead of being given that opportunity to improve your station in life, not just yours, but that of your family, your community, your kith and kin. So these are complicated issues, and people's tensions, they just go up. And there are demagogues who want us to be angry, to say it has to be Asians against Blacks, without realizing that that framing is inaccurate. It isn't Asians against Blacks. It's how do we ensure opportunity and distribute it? How do we look at these situations where the resources are being constrained and communities are being brought into conflict and told that's who you should blame? That's why your kid didn't get in. Instead of recognizing that at all of these institutions, there just are too few seats to begin with, and that the way that we've been selecting is intrinsically biased, that it has systematic flaws that disadvantage people. There are studies that
you wrote something very interesting in one of your articles, that in the case of Harvard in particularly, I think you were talking about Harvard, Asian applicants are not losing out to Black applicants, but to white applicants.
That's right. People don't realize that if Asians and Blacks are forced into competition for one another, the cause for that is helping whites. It's not affirmative action for African Americans and Latinos that's holding Asian Americans back. It's affirmative action for whites and the overall lack of seats. We're persuaded that grades and test scores measure our moral worth as human beings. They do not. They are meaningful predictors, but we should know that we have so many more contributions that we can bring to the table, and that when we try to reduce people in this way, instead of looking at them holistically, one of the ironies is when you ask people who oppose affirmative action, what would you want us to do? And then they describe an admission system and evaluation system. They're often describing affirmative action, the effort to ensure that we account for the obstacles that people have overcome, that we look at the different circumstances that people start from and say, well, are we serious about what we say? Because right at this moment, these issues, they're all related. Black Lives Matter, college admissions. Right now, everyone says, we have to do better. We want our institutions, our elite institutions, to look like this diverse democracy. I have a different way to frame this issue. It's not, should we abolish affirmative action? A different way to frame this, it's more productive, is to say, do we really mean this? What we say, all these emails and messages, these speeches people are giving, oh, I pledge to fight discrimination and to include more people of every background. If we do, then we have to ask, how does that happen? Because it doesn't happen automatically.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen unless you take into account the lived reality, the pain that some people feel that others do not.
Right. I want to get, we only have about 5 more minutes. I want to jump ahead to the job that you're about to take over. By the time this interview airs, you will have taken over as president of Queens College. You've been meeting with faculty, administrators, students. What impressions are you getting so far? What are you hearing from the people at Queens College about particular needs that they have?
This was the right choice for me. There are many people who can lead, and I won't claim any particular expertise. When you're looking at opportunities such as this, it's about being at the right place at the right time. And what I'm humbled by is the commitment of everyone, students, alumni, faculty, staff, to a notion that seems almost quaint. You know, almost all institutions of higher education, not all, but almost all, they talk a good talk. You look at their website, you look at their brochures, they're all about diversity, inclusion, access. Then you look at what they charge for tuition, then you look at who runs them, then you look at everything else about them, and you have to wonder, are they serious? They might be sincere, but they're not living up to what they're advertising, except the CUNY system in Queens College. Because I'll tell you, when I have been meeting people, and we're just talking, I haven't started officially, I'm just getting to know folks. It's true. So many of them are that first generation or second generation. So many of them are the honest strivers. They grew up in Queens. They had to take the bus and work part-time, and they could put themselves through school working part-time. They lived at home. They are that story that we want to celebrate. This is what the institution was created for. And to meet that embodiment of the American dream, it's so good to know that, because our institutions, just like individuals, have to be resilient and cooperative now. We have to adapt. This moment is fraught, it's anxious, we're challenged on every side, and we have to come together despite the forces pulling us apart.
One of the things that I think it seems that higher educations do, it seems that they're always talking about expanding, getting bigger. Columbia has taken up the Upper West Side, NYU has taken up the Village, always talking about expanding. And I sometimes wonder if they should say, okay, we're at the right size that we should be. And we should concentrate not on getting bigger, but on making what we have better.
I couldn't agree more. A university, a college, is not the buildings on campus. It's the content of the education. It's the opportunity. It's the credential. It's the network. And most of all, it's that sense of community. We're all sheltering in place still. And as we reopen, we have this yearning to make social contact again. And we have to know that institutions remain strong. But we have learned from this experience so much of what will happen. So summer enrollment is up more than 25%. It's record setting, and it's virtual, it's online. Now, you know, I might be old fashioned. I think it's better to interact with people in what they call real time now, to see them. And I would like to go back to shaking hands and sitting down and breaking bread. But a virtual interaction is better than none at all. And so if we can blend this, that's part of the adaptation. We will bounce, not back, but forward. We never return to where we were before, and we shouldn't. Our aspiration should be to do better. And what we've learned from this, if anything, so many companies are saying, you know, we don't need a fancy marble foyer and expensive rent in a prestigious building. People actually can work at home, because it isn't the outward sign that you have a fancy new building that shows the school is excellent. It's whether you give people skills and lift them up. That is what defines Queens College and CUNY. That's what higher education is about, opportunity. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for American higher education. I believe in it.
I'm afraid we're out of time. I want to thank Frank H. Wu, the President Designate of Queens College, for joining me today. And I want to welcome you to Queens College and to the City University of New York. And for the City University of New York and One to One, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.